This is Johnny Gould's Jewish State.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I did the pink and yellow thing because I just wanted it to be sort of recognizable that this is me originally. I've lived in Israel all my life. I watch social media. I watch Gazans documenting their lives on social media. And there's something fascinating for me to be watching them as they want to be seen, as opposed to how they are shown on the media as victims, etc. As I really love the way that we are seeing them not via the prism of the conflict, and not for Israelis. We have very much we see them in the prism of our relationship with them. And I get the opportunity, because I watch them on social media as they're documenting themselves, is just to see them as they want to see themselves, or as they want to show themselves, not as victims, to show their creativity, their innovative side. They are very innovative. They are very resilient. They love showing their at least the people who could live well, they loved showing it. They love bragging about it. Exactly.
I was a visitor to Kerem Shalom myself just weeks before October the 7th, and I was witness to Gazans working throughout Israel, not just in the south, in those kibbutzim who they betrayed, but in the north as well. And I could tell the difference between those who are Israeli Arabs and those who are Gazans, because I could sense, in retrospect, I'm not a great wizard or magician, but I could sense that something was up. When I wished Gazans good morning, they wouldn't look me in the eye. There was
Really?
a tension between those who were Gazans and those who were Israeli Arabs, working in hotels and various other places. I'd been a few
That's very
times
interesting.
to Israel.
Mm.
And now
the
economy has been destroyed by October the 7th, hasn't it?
From what I've seen, yes, but we've recovered, the IDF has recovered immense amount of money, cash in the tunnels that they've squirreled away. So we don't know how much more that we haven't found, that IDF hasn't found.
Are these
anyway.
dollars? These are Qatari dollars, probably, aren't they?
No, shekels.
They're shekels.
They found shekels. They found dollars. Yeah. It's interesting that you should say that the Gazans didn't want to interact with you, because they were making videos from Israel. The workers, the Palestinian workers, Gazan workers who were coming into Israel, were making videos and showing the country quite proudly, because they see it as their country. And they were showing their work. They were showing themselves in the places they were working quite freely.
Maybe the camera is a different scenario. When it's on, they behave differently. But I'm talking about Gazans who are sort of working without being without addressing a camera, I presume is different.
Yeah.
I also, like you, clock videos and make my own assumptions about it. I saw a Saudi of some eminence walking through the old city of Jerusalem about 2 days before, and I saw local, what can only be described as probably Palestinians in East Jerusalem, spitting at him, throwing stones at him. And I wondered about what was about to happen. And this was more than just Jenin. There was something else at play here. It's as though the community in Gaza, which as we found is all joined up. There are so many people who are complicit in Hamas within the citizenry. It's very difficult for IDF soldiers to actually know the difference between who is a soldier and who is a civilian. Actually, that they knew in some detail and in some populace what was about to happen on October the 7th.
Well, I had no idea. I
We had no idea, but they did as a
as
community.
someone who was watching, I was watching the thing. I did see things that, in hindsight, were interesting. For instance, for a long time, they seemed to be investing a lot in tourism. They they built a new road to the north, towards Sikkim, towards the Israeli border, and they were selling plots of land on that strip of road that was going to be for tourist attractions. Now, that strip of road, that area, already was like a touristy area. There were hotels on that stretch, and they were building new beach resorts, and also they had something that was very prevalent in Gaza, something they called chalets, which were rental villas with swimming pools that Gazans and Gazan families and groups of Gazans used to rent, usually for the day or for the evening, not really to sleep over, but sometimes to sleep over as well. And they used to have little holidays there. And there were a lot of them on that stretch of road going up towards the north, towards the Israeli border on the north, on the beach. There were loads of them, and they were very, the best ones. There's hundreds of these chalets all over the Gaza Strip. But on that stretch of road, they were the nicest ones and the best ones. What else were they doing? They were renovating the what they call the corniche, the promenade on the Gaza city front, and they were building another corniche on in Khan Younis. They were trying to clean up the beaches from all sorts of. They had sort of people selling things on the beach, and they had stalls, and they were trying to run these people off. They were and to build nicer places, nicer cafes and nicer resorts. So this was always very strange, because it was sort of okay, we're building tourism. They even brought in a few tourists from Judea and Samaria, from Palestinian Authority areas from, I think I saw one from Egypt and other places, were to show, like YouTubers and that sort of thing, to show how nice Gaza is and come here as tourists. So, I thought, okay, they're trying to make they're building tourism. But after the 8th of October, I started to realize that was just a con. It was just, it wasn't real. And a lot of things that they were building and developing, I don't know how much of it was just for show, to show the Israelis that they weren't interested in war. There was a lot of construction going on. Hardly a day went past without the opening of a new business, restaurant, cafe, all sorts of luxury stores, like the luxury car dealership on the main beach road. It was like this big glass building, beautiful big glass building, and next to it they built like it had a twin glass building which became a cafe. And there were all these speculations on TikTok what it's going to be. They fantasized it would be KFC. They love KFC, but actually they have KFC there. They have They have local equivalents of sort of fried chicken, which I am sure are much better than KFC because their food is fabulous. They had loads of restaurants, and you know, you see the foods there, really, really impressive. So they built this beautiful, beautiful car dealership, and the opening was, you never seen anything like it. It was with pyrotechnic and smoke, and the whole of Gaza turned out, and they had these luxury cars being sold there. And next door, the cafe, they opened it, and this is in August. I don't know where they came from. I know there was a lot of import of cars via Israel.
Really?
There was a big business of second-hand European EU cars coming in, 2-3 years old, and they were doing a great business with these cars. I don't see why these luxury cars wouldn't come in from Israel via Israel either. They import stuff via Ashdod port. And they had importers who were coming in and out of Israel, and they had special sort of visas, licenses to come into Israel. And you had very rich businessmen and importers who were importing goods all the time. And these were very, very rich people, and sometimes you could see family members were documenting themselves, so you could see they lived in these enormous mansions, fabulous, all gold, and they had the best cars, of course. They were very ostentatious. So I can't say that everything was coming through the tunnels at all, because hundreds of trucks with goods were going in via Israel all the time. I mean, the supermarkets were fully stocked, with everything, and not just Israeli goods at all. I mean, they had much more choice than in Israeli supermarkets, because in Israeli supermarkets you have the kosher, everything has to be kosher. So and we have very strong food monopolies. So they had more options and more choice than in Israeli supermarkets. And the supermarkets also was like a thing. They were building supermarkets all the time, and they were big and they were beautiful. And even they had they built one of these beautiful supermarkets in Nuseirat, in the center of Gaza Strip, which is ostensibly a refugee camp. And
You must
they
put
had
that
one of these.
in parentheses, in inverted commas.
Yes, because the refugee camps were sort of a political statement. They weren't really refugee camps. They were slums.
Yes.
On the whole, they were run down neighborhoods. They were completely built up. I think Gazans now are discovering what a refugee really means, sadly. But
Yes, quite. I want to ask you here that, you described all these developments that you'd seen leading up to October the 7th as a giant subterfuge, a con in your words. But may I ask you this, that actually it might not have been a con, that actually the leadership in Qatar and Turkey actually weren't a party to the military wing of Hamas. There's talk that not only did it surprise Iran and Hezbollah, who'd planned this sort of massacre, and that was taken from them in terms of surprise, but it also caught the leadership in absentia by surprise as well, that Hamas aren't quite as joined up as we all thought.
that could be. I really don't. cover that side of things.
Because I spoke to Chaviv Rettig Gur and Jonathan
Yeah.
Swire about this, and of course they're talking about, and many other commentators are talking about, a failure in Israeli imagination, that they really thought that Hamas was sort of approaching this idea of, well, here we are building supermarkets and skyscrapers, encouraging tourism, and we're accepting the millions of dollars, which we're turning a blind eye in, paper bags coming in from Qatar. So actually, this new idea that we can allow visas and allow thousands of Gazans in was actually a giant subterfuge. And in fact, in dealing only with the ruling class, Israel was contre.
Well, when you see the discourse among Gazans, ordinary Gazans, not the leadership, the animosity to Israel and to Jews and the Zionist entity was very, very strong. You couldn't miss it. The education, even I used to watch street interviews. The interview YouTubers did like these jokey street interviews, and a lot of them were, say, they had one that they used to do, where they used to come out with an Israeli flag and say, I support Israel, and people passing by used to come and beat them up. And no, it's just a prank, stop. I used to follow the kindergarten graduation ceremonies. They had these parties and they had, they used to make a big thing of it. And in every kindergarten graduation celebration, they had a military sort of
Cosplay.
Or what do you call it? Yes, they had them all dressed up in military fatigues, and they'd run around and they'd wave toy guns around. They even had, in one of them, they had like a surprise announcement at the end of they were running around with their guns, and then they had this big announcement in which they said, we've had, and this was just a few months before October the 7th, we've had a special announcement. Israel has fallen, as it were. The resistance has conquered Israel. The last Zionist has left, and we've freed all of Palestine. And everyone's clapping and cheering. So it's and they had these all the time. These celebrations and these they acted out a lot what they want to do. The children in school as well. But I especially followed the graduations of the little children in the kindergartens, because they were starting young. And this is how these people saw the world and see the world. So this isn't really a situation of coming to terms with Israel's existence. This is building a population which feels it's right to destroy Israel. It's right. It is its mission to destroy Israel.
They see Gaza as a pit stop towards their inevitable return to what they think is there. And so this terrible war will continue long after Israel, in inverted commas, wins this war and unseats Hamas. We have a United States which is determined to stop the incursion into Rafah because of the presumably hundreds of thousands of Gazans sheltering there. But Israel must go into Rafah to defeat the final battalions and maybe, just maybe, God willing, bring home some of the human shield hostages that are there. Have you got any Rafah videos for us?
From today, from these days.
In recent days.
Well, before the IDF isn't actually in Rafah. It's in the eastern outskirts of Rafah. Rafah border crossing, which IDF is currently holding, is in the east of the east southeast of the city. They're not actually in the city. The situation in Rafah before IDF went in now was really good. They had everything. They were living ordinary lives. A lot of them were displaced, but they had enough food, and they were starting to they were opening schools, businesses were opening. They had lots of shawarma restaurants working, and now I know one of the things that the US is saying is that they don't see how all these people can evacuate. Well, I'm seeing videos. What I'm seeing now is videos of people evacuating. They're getting in cars, they're getting on trucks, and they're moving their tents to a new place. And they're not happy about it. Obviously, it's terrible. It's terrible and it's difficult, but it is a matter of packing up a tent and moving the tent to a new location, and they're doing it, and it's not really a big problem. It's not the big problem that it's being portrayed. It is doable, and they are doing it. As soon as they feel that their lives are in danger, they get up and go. Which is what has been happening all the time in this war, is that when they get warning from the IDF, and they get plenty of warning, they get flyers they get flyers, they call them up on the phone. The IDF spokesman in Arabic tells them again and again. They get up and go.
Jackie, as I mentioned before, your journalism is a product of the social media age. You are exposing the mainstream media and indeed leading politicians, their narrative to be, well, let's just say they are lies, or they follow a certain discourse, and that it's not a prison camp, and that, in fact, they have brought this failing upon themselves. And yet your videos do expose the idea that rather than blaming the Hamas leadership, they will still blame the Jews for this downfall, won't they?
Well, first of all, I don't see myself as a journalist. I'm just...
You're a citizen's journalist by the definition.
I'm just someone...
This old long in the tooth journalist would call you a citizen's journalist for what you're doing. It is brilliantly done. It is very, very disciplined. I know exactly what I'm going to get from Imshin. It's a brilliant resource, and you are changing the narrative. People can't just freely call it a prison camp anymore because you have exposed them as liars.
Well, the thing is that I think what I show is that there was plenty of money in Gaza. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't distributed fairly. I mean, there were billions in aid were coming in, but they weren't reaching everyone. There was a class of people who were very rich. There was another class of people who were, you could say, middle class, which I wasn't, that was my big surprise, was that there was a middle class in Gaza. And Hamas, it was in interest to leave a lot of people very poor, because they could they were in their hands. They were their they could get them, use them as cannon fodder, send them to the borders to riot, and they could sell them this fantasy that they were going to go back to their homes. Their homes don't exist anymore, of course, but they could go back to their homes inside Israel, which they can't. But they were selling them this fantasy. And the stronger that Hamas got, and the more successful they seem to be, I think Gazans bought into this, because they were doing, they had these military marches all the time. They had military marches, and they seemed to be very powerful. And everyone knew they were building under Gaza. And Hamas told them, and they believed, that the Israelis were cowards and they would never dare go into Gaza. And they believed this.
Can I talk about the consequences it has upon you to watch this day after day after day? These are psychopathic neighbours who want to kill everyone north of the border. And I know, like you, I find some of the constant detailing of the war against Israel and the war against the Jewish diaspora extremely tiring. But like you, I feel drawn back to it all the time. This is a kind of mission for you, isn't it? You have found a corner of Israeli life that needs to be chronicled like no one else does. You're drawn back to it all the time, aren't you, Jackie?
Well, I've been doing it for, I think, about 6 years now, since I discovered it completely by mistake. It actually, until 7th of October, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was draining or difficult, because I was watching people going about their lives and showing their lives, and it was fun. I watched hours and hours of YouTubers just talking about their lives and showing their lives and doing challenges.
This is Johnny Gould's Jewish State.
All these silly things that YouTubers do. I mean, they were doing them in Gaza, and they had big stars. I mean, another thing that I watched a lot was the advertisements. They were advertising little businesses, big businesses. They were advertising themselves, and I was fascinated, because I discovered it by mistake. I thought what everyone else thought. I thought that everyone was poor. I thought that they had terrible shortages, and I discovered it just wasn't true. I remember you might remember during the marches of return around about 2018, 2019, they were sending incendiary balloons over to Israel and burning fields of people.
And killing cows.
The farmers in the south, yes. So I thought to myself, this was right at the beginning of when I was watching, and I thought, well, that's it. They won't allow balloons in now. That's it for them. No more balloons for Gaza, because I thought, I believed the blockade. I believed there was a blockade. I believed things weren't going in. And I very quickly discovered that they love balloons in Gaza. There are every event, there are hundreds of balloons. Every birthday, every shop opening, and there are a lot of shop openings, they have hundreds of balloons. And they had shops called balloons. They had special gift shops where they sort of wrapped things up and had special presents with loads of balloons popping out and everything. And that's, that's a sort of sign that there really wasn't much of a blockade going on. Everything was going in, even things that were hurting Israel. I mean, I think the first thing was, okay, no more balloons, but it just didn't happen. And to go back to your question, it started to be difficult after the 7th of October. Because, I didn't, it was just, I didn't want to know anymore. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. It becomes extremely, it becomes a real toll on one's condition. And I just wanted to ask you about Mr. Fafo, who is up for an Oscar, isn't he, this year? But we haven't seen him in weeks, have we?
Well, we have. He's all the time. He's on.
So he's been a doctor. He's been a father. He's been all sorts of wonderful things.
He's still going very well. He's making a lot of money. He's getting donations. He's
a Patreon hero. He's like a
from what I've heard. From what I've heard, he's been pocketing quite a lot of the donations that he's collected. He's going around in an expensive SUV at the moment, $40,000 car. Yeah. He recently paid to get his mother out. He said she's ill and she needed to leave to get medical treatment. I hope for her that she gets it. So let me tell you a bit about Mr. Fafo from the other side, not from what we see. First of all, I've known him for years. I've been following him for a long time. He was a YouTuber, a singer. He didn't put out a lot of stuff, but he wasn't one of the big YouTubers, and he wasn't famous. But I used to I've shared some of his stuff in the past. And he was, I always thought he was a bit of a, he was funny and down to earth looking. There's one video with him where he goes to his sister graduated from high school, so he goes with their mother to the gold market in Gaza City to buy her a gift for graduation. So you see the gold market. There's a very flourishing gold business, gold trade in Gaza. Lot of jewelry shops, and they make their own stuff, and they import gold. And there's like a historic gold market in Gaza City, which they say it's like the ancient gold market. Well, it turns out it wasn't a gold market. It is from the Mamluk, the actual market. The buildings are from the Mamluk era. But it wasn't a gold market in the past. It became a gold market. This is from research I did. It only became a gold market around about the 80s. In the Israeli era, Gazans started to make a lot of money, which they didn't in the Egyptian era. They were very poor, and in the Israeli era, they made a lot of money, and they wanted to invest it in something, and they invested in gold. So the market gradually became a gold market, and now it's the ancient gold market from Roman times. So anyway, when he started to become famous on Israeli TV, on international TV, and on social media as this, with all the memes and everything, someone made a video, a sort of flyer saying that he had been, in Hebrew, saying that he had been killed by IDF, sort of with a saying at the top, eliminated, and saying all of his different roles in life, sort of that he was a doctor, dentist, and a journalist, and all, you know, all the jokes about his different roles. And he saw it, or it was sent to him, and he didn't understand it. So he thought it said it was like a wanted dead or alive sort of thing. And he, you know, no one bothered to translate it into Arabic. So they didn't realize it was a joke. And he became this, and it was on Al Jazeera that the IDF had him on a list of people who need to be eliminated. And yeah, that a lot of his fame in the Arab world, I think, came from this, that he became sort of important to the IDF, and I laughed at the time because I thought, well, you know, if IDF soldier gets their hands on him, they're going to take selfies with him because he's so popular in Israel, and he was sure he was like #1 target. Anyway, and he continues with this. He continues to play on his fame and try to cash in on it.
You know, you're such an expert on life in Gaza over the last 6 years. Are you a consultant for anyone within government? I mean, you could almost be a cab driver down there, couldn't you? You know your way around.
Well, I did want at one point, I had this idea of making a tour guide, an online tour site. Listen, I deal with the fluff. You know, I watch videos about restaurants, and I watch the food bloggers. Yes, there are food bloggers in Gaza. There were a lot of restaurants, and they had a lot of work to do. I cover all the openings.
The
I watch
lifestyle.
them
You're the lifestyle editor.
shopping for clothes. That's the side I know, is the ordinary side. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know much about Hamas, and I don't know much about the inner workings of government. And that's another thing that you see when you watch Gaza's social media. You realize that Gaza was a de facto state, with a government, with functioning municipalities. It wasn't. It was a state. It was an independent state. They did what they wanted. So this was something that was very, very clear to someone who was following, as I was following, just the ordinary people documenting themselves, is that you could see that there was a government. There were different government ministries, all belonging to Hamas. The municipalities all belong to Hamas. You saw the police patrolling the streets. You could see it very well during COVID, that they control the situation very strictly, much more strictly than anywhere else that I'd seen.
There was never a famine in Gaza. There were famines in Egypt. There was starvation in Egypt. There was never starvation in Gaza. Since October the 7th, there's been a lot made by the NGOs and Hamas and the international media about a famine in Gaza. By your estimation and your watching of videos, is there a famine in Gaza, or is it created by Hamas appropriating the aid and then selling it at hugely inflated prices to the poorest of people. What is the famine or non-famine situation in Gaza Strip today, Jackie?
Well, I have seen no evidence of a famine in Gaza. Again, I don't watch Hamas propaganda. I watch videos that ordinary people make. They have complained about shortages at certain points. Most of the problems, the shortages were solved as more and more food came in. There were points where food was very expensive. Now, this is, I know that food was coming in all the time, but as you say, Hamas was appropriating it and selling it to the markets. I haven't seen, I watch the streets, I watch the people in the streets. There are poor people, there are always poor people. But no one seems to be, you don't see emaciated people. People have energy, the markets are full. Now, there was a point where North Gaza wasn't getting food as much because people in the south were raiding the trucks. You had these aid trucks on their way to the north, and they were being raided by Gazans in the south, and they weren't reaching. But as the food, there was more and more food in the south, and prices started coming down. They stopped raiding the trucks in the south, and trucks started arriving in the north and solved the problems. So there was a while where I think living was difficult in the north, but that is not the situation now. They have plenty of flour. Some bakeries have reopened in the north. Lots of bakeries are functioning in the south, but they have them now in the north. A few shawarmas have opened in the north as well. There is food. And there's one guy called Hussein who I follow who gives updates about prices in the north. He's in Gaza City and he gives updates how much things cost. Now, Israelis, when they see my videos giving the prices, current prices in Rafah, current prices in Gaza City, they laugh because it's cheaper than in Israel. Now, before October 7th, everything was very, very cheap in Gaza, very cheap. I mean, you know, you'd pay very little for food there. So, of course, for a Gazan, paying more, any price is astronomical. But we as Israelis who pay so much for food, seeing how cheap everything in Gaza is, it's, you know, people laugh. Of course, so you would say to that, well, they don't have the money to pay. Somehow they are paying. I mean, if you're asking for a high price in the market, someone is paying that price, otherwise they'd bring the price down. If no one could buy it, then they'd bring the price down. And they're not. Well, eventually they had, because competition was such that they had to bring the prices down. I don't know what's happening now because of the closure of Rafah border crossing. I'm not sure if it's opened again. I think Kerem Shalom has opened again. They are also getting food now from the north. From Erez crossing is open and trucks of aid are coming in via Israel. They were airdropping food. The Americans, the Jordanians were airdropping food. Well, it was a bit of a joke because a whole day of airdropping would drop on them the amount that one truck would bring in. So it was more sort of that people will see that they're sending in money, sending in food, and they didn't really like these MREs the Americans were sending. They prefer to get real food and to make their own. One thing they're talking a lot. They talk a lot, especially in the South, but also in the North, that they are fed up of canned food. They're getting all these cans of food, and they're completely fed up of it.
Yeah, they're used to a
want,
higher quality of food than the
yes,
Americans. The poor Palestinians give them toothpaste in a tube, where actually they're used to kind of a Mediterranean life. You know, they live by the coast. They're a kind of land of plenty. It's a ridiculous situation for people to understand.
The food there, well, food in Gaza is wonderful. I mean, they're wonderful cooks. They make wonderful food. They love fresh meat. They love they love to make everything from scratch. They don't like produced food. So after a few months of eating canned food, they're really sick, and they say that we're sick of it. We're sick of it. We want real food. We want meat. We want. So at one point, a lot of chicken started coming in.
Right.
So they were eating a lot of chicken. Yeah, and even when there weren't bakeries working, they were making their own. They were making their own bread. Cooking gas comes and goes, so they cook with on wood burners.
Yes.
So they've gone a lot back to sort of traditional cooking ways. With they have these clay ovens, which is like the traditional cooking way, and they know how to cook like that. So they went back to that.
You have 65,000 followers on Twitter for this extraordinary vocation that you've created. Jackie, you must have contact with Gazans themselves, people on DM with you regularly. Do you respond to those people?
Well, sometimes sometimes I'm attacked by Gazans, so I get a lot of sort of hate mail, which I ignore, obviously. I have had periods where I've been in contact with Gazans. I've had Gazans who support what I'm doing. On the whole, look, most Gazans don't speak English. You know, when we see the Hamas propaganda is in English, so you get the feeling that they know English, that they're more educated than they are. Most Gazans do not speak English.
A lot of them speak Ivrit, though, don't they?
Only if the older ones, people who worked in Israel in the olden days. Mainly, or people who are in prison in Israel. That's who know Hebrew. So I haven't really been much in contact with Gazans, much less than other commentators, you know, as I call them, the serious commentators, the ones who really know the Gazan innings and outings of politics and everything. That's not me. Also, I have made an effort not to be in contact with Gazans over the years because I don't want to put them in danger. Because being in contact with me could be problematic for them. On the other hand,
yes,
people who would contact me or try to connect with me might be not independent players. And there have been a lot of that. We saw that on the 7th of October, that people who had been in contact with Israelis in in the kibbutzim turned out to be Hamas operatives.
Do you sense any revolt amongst the population, given that the IDF has removed a lot of the Hamas leadership, that actually they might be helped along the IDF by a revolt by the people as they find that their Hamas stronghold is being loosened?
There have been points of where there has been a beginning of revolts, of people daring to speak out more than they would have. I think now with the support Hamas is getting internationally and from the US, people are probably realizing that it's not a good idea to come out against Hamas. Now, all the time that I've been following Hamas, that I've been following Gaza, there has been התנגדות. I forgot the opposition. There's been opposition to Hamas. There's the Fatah, what's left of Fatah in Gaza. There have been clans that have been powerful clans that have been weakened by Hamas because they were opposition. And there have been uprisings. There was one in March 2019. There was one just now in end of July 2023. There was an uprising. And each time they try to uprise, they are put down very, very brutally. People go to prison, people disappear, people are beaten. They open fire on protesters. It's very difficult to oppose Hamas. There was one story. This man, he was a journalist, and he published a story about corruption in donations to the needy. He was like at the top of a charity director or something, and what the journalist hadn't realized was that he was connected to Hamas. Now, what he was doing was he was demanding sexual favors from women, needy women in Gaza in return for food. He was inviting these women to come to apartments and to chalets, and some of them even were widows of shaheeds who have a sort of elevated shaheeds, and their families, the martyrs, have a sort of elevated status in Palestinian society. And even them, they were trying to extort like this. So he was hauled into interrogation. He came out, and he published an apology. You know, I was mistaken, it's all wrong, I didn't know what I was talking about. And a few months later, he was thrown out of Gaza without his wife. And as far as I know, he's still gone. You know, he was never allowed to come back. It's very difficult to oppose Gaza. There is an opposition in outside of Gaza, but when the war started, they all sort of closed ranks because the Mukawama, the resistance, as it were, which is really a sort of a violent fight against Israel, trumps everything. So they pull together. So you've got like the main opposition to Hamas in exile is now part of the war effort, as it were. This is also something that happened in Gaza. During war, if you oppose Hamas, you are you're cooperating with the enemy. So people won't do that because as much as they may hate Hamas, and a lot of people hate Hamas, they hate Israel they hate Israel more and they hate the Jews more. And that's like the common enemy above everything.
And that brings us on to the final question, Jackie, which is, as you have painted this extremely vivid picture of Gaza and Gazans, however much they hate Hamas, they hate the Jews more, they hate Israelis more. We can unseat the government of Hamas, we can unseat the military. There is recent evidence, of course, Al-Qaeda was unseated in Iraq and Syria. But to unseat the consensus of what is broadly called the Palestinian people is a hatred that will last beyond our lifetime, isn't it?
Well, we've got 70 years of indoctrination and brainwashing. And also you have to remember that Gazans don't know Israelis. The younger generation don't know Israel and don't know Israelis. I think before the Oslo Accords, Gazans knew Israelis. Gazans knew Jews. They knew we didn't have horns. They knew we had a merciful side. They knew we were, a lot of them knew that we could be good employees for employers, for instance. There were connections. People used to come to weddings. They're very hospitable people, so they invited their Israeli friends to their weddings, to their homes. I had Gazan friends before the Oslo Accords. They knew I wasn't an ogre. They knew I wasn't a terrible person. But now the divide is such, and the indoctrination is such, that unless very, very deep changes happen in Palestinian society, in Gazan society, I don't see much hope for change. Sad to say. This is something I discovered when I was starting to learn about Gaza and to watch Gaza. It was a deep sadness, and because I realized that it's not good. It's not a good situation at all. And this separation between us hasn't been good for the way they see us. It hasn't improved the way they see us. Something that the Gazans believe very deeply is that with their terrorism and with their violent actions, they managed to get rid of the Jews. This is a great military success. What happened in 2005, that Israel disengaged from Gaza completely, that Israel left Gaza, is seen as a win for violence, and it's seen as a way to get rid of the Jews completely. We just have to do the same, do more and more of the same inside Israel, and the Jews will leave. And this is the way to go. Violence is the way to go. That's what they learned from the disengagement of 2005. Sadly.
So the final question is, and it's one of hope, which is that there are millions of Arab leaders in the Gulf who say that we are also the children of Abraham and that we are part of the region. We talk about MBZ and MBS, inshallah, God willing, the Bahraini leader, the Moroccan king who is commanded by his ancestors to look after the Moroccan Jewish population through time. Gaza is razed in many, many areas and destroyed. Is there any way that the Saudis, the UAE, Bahrain, the Sunni leadership, which says that Israel and the Jewish people are part of the region, can go into Gaza to rebuild it and create a new Sunni-based, more peaceful orientated Palestinian Authority with a small a?
Well, I'm afraid to say I don't see that happening. I don't see, why would they?
Because of the building contracts, because of the billions of dollars involved, and also the threat that Muslim Brotherhood continues to pose to them. Because if Egypt falls, then they're across the border. You know, it's kind of self-interest. Not only is it business, billions of dollars worth of new influence, but also the idea that they knock Iran, that they reduce their influence to the south, towards North Africa, and towards them in the Gulf.
I really don't think that the Gulf leaders or the Saudis would want to get involved. I don't think so. I'm afraid I don't see it happening. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I wanted to put that in towards the beginning of the interview, and I'm going to put that right at the end because you talk with tremendous detail, with passion, and with knowledge. Jackie Peleg, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Johnny Gould's Jewish State.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was tremendous. Thank you very much. Thank you.